Hey everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here, your host of UnWoke Academy. Welcome to another episode. This time we're going to dive into a little bit of memory lane. But first, I want to give a tip of the hat to our friends over at OBBM Network. They're a great distribution partner. You should check them out. They stream on Roku, Apple TV, and a whole bunch of other places. So depending on where you go to get this, you can find UnWoke and all sorts of great content on OBBM Network. So let me go back a little bit to the beginnings of what you now see. There's an origin to this whole thing. Many, many years ago, I owned a company that did work for what's called a third-party administrator. Bear with me, this will bear fruit, this conversation. You need to know a little bit about this background because it's important to things like your workplace retirement plan, your 401k or 403b, etc. So there are these companies out there called third-party administrator, and those are the groups of people that administer 401k plans and things like them. It's the institutional world of finance. So the company that I owned did a lot of work for this company that was a third-party administrator, and in what was a really nice compliment at the time, I did a lot of work for them. I was there regularly. I got to know the owners and the management team, etc. And they made a compliment. They paid me a compliment by saying that I have the ability to not only grasp highly technical information, but I'm also a good communicator. And apparently that's difficult to find. And in that area of finance, in that particular world, it's really highly sought after. To be able to grasp tremendous amounts of detail, and I actually pride myself on it. I love kind of the puzzle nature of where I work in the world of finance. And in my worldview, in 2024, I sort of hate using Venn diagrams because of the nitwits currently occupying the White House, but it still sort of works, and Venn diagrams do have a place. In my world, it's sort of that overlap between law, legal, legislative code, investment, and some sort of IRS and tax and those sorts of things. And all of that overlaps. And there's a lot of technicality to how plans have to be administered. So anyway, that led to me selling my company and going to work for this third-party administrator. And that launched a career. I was recruited by a company called McDonald & Company, based out of Cleveland, Ohio. I spent some years there doing a lot of retirement plan work. Just as a side note, for anybody that knows McDonald, they were, in their heyday, they were a huge brokerage firm with lots of financial advisor types. And when I went in, I was recruited, and I went in as just by far the youngest person there. A lot of the people that had been there, they were in their 70s and 80s, and I was just this kid. At the time, I didn't really have any of this gray hair, and I sort of stood out like a sore thumb, but I quickly realized that the particular skill set that I have called ERISA subject matter expert, that's actually really sought after, and it kind of helped me to quickly kind of feel like I had my feet under me in an environment where a lot of people were probably 20, 30, 40, 50 years my senior and had very established careers in finance. So anyway, from there, same thing, a company called Merrill Lynch, which I'm sure you've heard of. At the time, they were 51% owner, I think, of BlackRock. They recruited me, and etc. Some years with Wall Street and everything. But here's the deal. Here is where the rubber meets the road in that particular career. And I've actually given this description many, many times. So in the world of finance, for what most people think of, just based on the glitzy, glamoury, the commercials for day traders and, all the sexy, cool stuff that you see in movies, I guess there are elements of that in the real world of finance, but that does not exist at all in institutional finance. And I, for years, just jokingly referred to myself as kind of the pension nerd in the suit, next to the broker or the advisor or agent or rep or whatever, the financial planner. Because here's what that looked like. For years and years and years, I would be called into like a public utilities commission or a state or federal governmental entity, treasurers unions or treasurers clubs, organizations, things like that. And I would do training on compliance. And nobody likes that. I understand that. And I would like make light of it and I would just joke and stuff. Or I would be invited in to sit around a boardroom table. And that happened a lot. So there were boardroom tables all over the country. And I would fly to wherever and move from boardroom to boardroom. And I was either kind of coaching people and telling them about all the laws and regulations and rules, or this is actually started back before the internet really took off. And I used to go with a team of people. You kids, you're gonna laugh. I would go with a team of people on an actual plane and fly to places, and we would grab all of their compliance files and documents, and we would tape them all up and bundle them, and we would ship them back into kind of a compliance lab in Hudson, Ohio, which is sort of near Akron, in between Akron and Cleveland. And we would pull all those apart and we would scan and review all the documents and processing times and all that stuff, all the boring minutia that nobody in finance really wants to do. But I found that I'm pretty good at it, and I would be able to retain a lot of these facts, whatever. And we would bundle up the boxes and ship them back again. And later those turned into these 3-ring binders. Again, that's really before the internet and cloud, which, by the way, just simply means somebody else's server. Anyway, my point is that for all those years, up until an interesting change that took place in July of 2012, I was kind of an afterthought, and that's okay. I mean, that's understandable. The board, the governance group, whoever, the fiduciaries, the key decision makers, whoever that might be, would sit around the boardroom table, and they're all thinking in terms of, like, what is the market doing? What's a good guess about great places to invest? And there would be some stockbroker there invariably talking about the exchange rates and currency and where where certain standards were pegged based on European monetary value and stuff. And then they would make predictions and they would talk about some great thing. And it was sort of it was this repeat cycle for years, and it rarely changed. It was always sort of what I call, well, actually in the world of finance, we call that retail. So in retail finance, people can really say all kinds of stuff. They can pull out these charts and show the board of directors of XYZ company or the fiduciaries of their retirement plan, here's this cool investment and check it out. It did a zillion % last quarter and whatever. Obviously, I'm clearly just exaggerating. But they would talk up some sort of investment. And then once they were all done with that and everybody was dazzled by the excitement and they're kind of frothing, it had been this was back Blackberries were introduced. So I think maybe some people started making some notes to do some trading based on the really exciting things that they learned from the stockbroker. And then we're at the end of the meeting, moments before everyone was wrapped up and they're all kind of done after the hour or 2 hour meeting or whatever, they would turn to me and say, oh, yeah, right. Where are we in compliance? And I'd point out, the fiduciary standards and what's happening with notifications and any law changes and stuff. And that was my job. That was my role for a long, long time. It was kind of an afterthought. But then interesting things started to happen. In July of 2012, new standards came out that really pushed for conflict of interest and fee disclosures. And a lot of those people who had worked in that sort of sexy world of retail finance, and they had been dabbling and crossing over back and forth, and then influencing fiduciary decisions inappropriately, they were called to the mat. Not as much as I would like to have seen, but at least some. And then there were all kinds of shenanigans that took place in Washington, D.C., and there are groups of people that created carve-outs for themselves, and they effectively got exemptions from these new laws. But overwhelmingly, the laws were pushing in this direction to uncover and unmask these conflicts. So here are these people that have been selling stuff, and of course, the broker, let's be honest about what's happening in that room. And I uncovered a lot of it, and it was frustrating. So these brokers, they would learn on a weekly basis in these sales meetings, what's the most profitable thing to sell? What's the hot new thing? And that would like sort of be loaded into their brain, is like preloaded for those conversations. And then they would go in and talk about how exciting this thing is. Here's this great opportunity, invest in this, blah, 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 whatever. And it's this wonderful opportunity. And it just seemed like overwhelmingly they were garbage. And the company, the issuing firm, and those are called underwriters. A lot of times the underwriters were loading up their sales staff. And when I worked and I'm not going to impugn Merrill Lynch, I think this is, a common practice. In this environment, there are all sorts of layers of complexity and ways of making money. For instance, a couple things all at once. One is for those retail issues, those things to sell, like a unit investment trust or an exchange traded fund or a new issue of a company that's just gone public or whatever. There are companies that line up to make profit off of that. But also in my environment, there's in that fiduciary world, there is a pay to play environment where a lot of these Wall Street firms, they know that they have however many billions or trillions of dollars, and they basically tell the world, if you have an investment like a mutual fund or something, and if you want access to sell that to our clients, these billions of dollars, you have to pay us to get access to sell your product here. And it's pay to play. So the more they pay, the more it moves up in the rank, and the more you get sales team out there pushing the product. That's how that world works. And that was in direct conflict with my role. So my role is to make sure that none of that happens. So it's a weird dynamic being at that table, sitting around the boardroom, and there were some very high profile, like probably some names that you've probably heard, where there might be 3 or 4 or 6 private jet type financial planner advisors, and it might fly people into New Jersey or New York and wine and dine them at a hotel for like 2 days and try and convince them that they need to move their $3 billion plan and that lump of money over here, and here's why, and all that stuff would happen. And most of it's taking place in the context of retail conversation, retail finance. Like, what's the hot stock? That kind of thing. And I got asked that all the time. You work at Merrill Lynch, or before that it was, pardon me, it was McDonald. And people would ask me, like, what's the hot buy? I don't know. My job is not to come here and tell you what the hot buy is. My job is to make sure that whatever's being done with all that money that's being managed on behalf of other people is being done appropriately and correctly and well documented, and that we stay within the confines of laws, rules, and regulations, and that the processing times are appropriate and everyone gets what's appropriate for them in fair amounts, and all these regulations and rules, because I make a point of memorizing as much of that as humanly possible. What can be done for the employer group versus the employees, and that testing and everything, because that's how I got my start. I know it's boring. I admit it. I've known it my whole career. Nobody really likes to spend a lot of time there, and I don't fault you. If you had 2 people sitting in front of you in the room, and one of them is telling you, here's this hot stock buy, and the other is saying, well, what we need to look at is the compliance, and are you doing the right thing on behalf of other people and stuff? I know that's boring, but it's my career. It's what I do. It's what made my career. It's what launched fee-based 401k, which became planned partners and all that stuff. So somebody had to do it, and it's me. Anyway, in that world, in that context, in that environment, I understood fully that dynamic. But then the more there was pressure to uncover and disclose conflicts of interest, I started to touch on the conflicts. So there are layers and layers and layers of those. There are what's called finder's fees. So if you sell 401k plans and try and convince companies out there, wherever your 401k plan is, convince as many as possible to come over to this other provider, and you can pick and choose, cherry pick whatever sort of sales pitch you want. The more you get to move there, each time they give you a huge bonus. So the people who sell those plans and move them to a new place, if you move a $20 million plan, you might make, I don't even know, $100,000. That's a big check. So like, here, move it here. But then clearly that influences those people, and it motivates them not to make the right choice for the plan, that $100 million 401k plan or whatever, 20 million, I think 20 million was my example. But the people that are affected in that plan, it motivates them to try and move as many as possible to that one. And then there are override fees, which means the sales agent who moves those plans, the longer they keep them there at one place, each year they get a big check on top of a check on top of a check to keep those plans there, which means never shopping around to try and find better fees or better service or better access to good investments or whatever. It means putting the blinders on and turning a blind eye to the ultimate beneficiaries, which is the working class, which is the people with the invested dollar saving for their retirement. And it gets worse from there. So you got pay to play, override fees, finder's fees. Then you have the different share prices of mutual funds. And I'm just one mutual fund family in particular. Sorry, I'm into the weeds a little bit, but this will come back around. Follow me on this. I'm convinced that you're going to like where this is headed. So there are one big mutual fund family out there. There are lots of different mutual funds. They have 16 different share classes, which means 16 different people could buy the exact same mutual fund and have different fees to buy that mutual fund. 16 for every mutual fund they issue. And then it gets more complicated because they might ink a direct deal and change the fee compensation structure. So all these big mega financial firms are all exchanging money and everything, and it siphons off money from the end user, the eventual beneficiary, which is you when you get ready to retire. So I started arguing in 2006 that getting as many fees out of the 401k plan as possible and just simply negotiating a fee that you can see and understand that's commensurate with the level of service, that makes sense. The financial industry hates that. They do not want fee for service. They want as many hidden fees as possible. So anyway, in that environment, in that world, you have that clash constantly of the retail advisor who really just wants to sell product, and the product can be legally, and then they're on paper, you've got some legislation that's trying to button down and trying to hold their feet to the fire, but you have tons of brokers and reps and financial advisors and stuff that can clearly put their financial interests ahead of the money that's being invested. In my world, that can never happen. Never. Not even a little bit. Not a hint. It should never and can never happen. With the supposed possible exception of disclaimers. So advisors out there who are unscrupulous, they can do the whole thing and they can get all the overrides and the finder's fees and the all the garbage, the pay to play, and they can do all that stuff as long as they disclose it appropriately. That's where those massive, thick booklets come in. And sometimes they're mailed to you 4 times a year, etc. And they're cumbersome, etc. Well, when I first started fee-based 401k, to launch the message that getting all those fees out of your investment, all things being equal, everyone knows it's just common sense logic that your investments will do better. If you're able to negotiate the fees down or negotiate the fees down and maybe also get them out of the plan. And I've seen huge retirement plans with massive fees. I've seen financial advisors making hundreds of millions of dollars a year to service a couple of plans. And there was one for like a decade. It was around $1 billion plan. I did little pieces of it, but the actual selling advisor on that was had homes in multiple states, and it was crazy, the amounts of money. And this were like payments in the $250,000 to $500,000 per quarter from one plan to one broker, and that's just ridiculous. It's just over the top, unpalatable, whatever. So here's this constant clashing, and at least on the surface level, there are some regulations that have made some noise about clearing all that up. Well, now let's enter environmental, social, and governance. I hear all the time from people that these retail advisors, the ones that are still bothering to dabble in the institutional space and sort of pretending that they understand that fiduciary world, the fiduciary realm, I hear all the time. And I just got an exchange. I'll see if I can copy it and share it maybe in the show notes or whatever. I just had an exchange this morning with somebody who was talking about a plan that it had massive fees, and then it just was moved into another plan with massive fees and all kinds of hidden stuff. And it's all by insurance reps. So these insurance reps have been, I'm sorry to say it, but in my book, it's just skimming. And they also, they love selling all kinds of other insurance products. I'm going to actually pause to give one other example. And this to me has been egregious. I think it's mostly gone from the marketplace, but it used to be prevalent in the 90s, late 80s and the 90s into the 2000s. Banks used to sell 401k plans, and they offered lending rate incentives. So they would go to these big companies that had big 401k plans or something like it, and they would say, if you move that 401k plan over to us and let us manage it, we're going to drop your line of credit interest rate from 5% to 3%, which will save you, whatever, they do the math on it. It could save $2 million a year in your interest rates on your bank loans. And the corporations used to love that. Well, lo and behold, the bank was not doing that simply out of the goodness of their heart. They would bury fees in the plan, which means those hardworking Americans laboring to save for retirement were saddled with extra fees, and the banks knew how to do it. They're good with numbers and math, and they would figure out if they're sacrificing $200,000 on the line of credit to the corporation, they'll make $600,000 off of the workers in extra fees from the 401k plan. Well, eventually that was made illegal to do, and then they found some subtle ways of trying to hide it for a while, and then people like me kept blowing the whistle, and eventually I think they're mostly gone. By the way, another caveat, important side note, these things that I'm mentioning, the override fees, the pay to play, the finder's fees, I am proud to say that in my career, I have never participated, not a dollar. I think that there's major elements of the financial world that think that that is mystifyingly awful. They think that I'm strange for that. And so what? I don't have a private yacht. I don't have a private jet. I have had a fairly comfortable life, but I can look myself in the mirror. I can look myself in the mirror and know that I didn't participate in the garbage that crushes the retirement dreams of millions and millions of working class, hardworking Americans. Never participated, not one penny, in any of that stuff. And I'm proud of that. But now we have that same clash, and we have this world of retail advisors out there, and the insurance reps and the financial advisors and the planners and the whatever, all those people that sell 401k plans. And some of those things still exist, those override fees and the pay to play and the finder's fees, etc. Some of that stuff still exists, but now those people are out there just playing along with the bandwagon, talking about DEI and ESG and all that stuff. Sure, ESG is great. Move your plan over here. Move all your hardworking your savings for retirement of your entire employee group. Move it on over here. And this place does great ESG. Well, now I am very pleased to announce that that is going to come back and bite them. I'm telling you, I'm telling everybody who will listen. I responded this morning and I'm posting all over online. Keep those communications. Hold on to those, because those are going to be gold for you when the lawsuits really start hitting. Just last week, the Secretary of State of Indiana, the state of Indiana, is suing for the use of ESG in investment environment, in fiduciary analysis. It's happening. There are, I think, 21 state attorneys general who are suing for the use of ESG in analytics. It's happening. We've got now American Airlines, New York City Workers Union. The unions are even getting into this. The unions are sniffing a rat, and they're noticing that the ESG thing was a fake movement. It was, like I've been saying for years, starting with my original expose on BlackRock, then Vanguard, and then all the other companies that followed. I am blowing the whistle, and I have been, and I will continue to blow the whistle. This ESG thing has been smoke and mirrors nonsense from the beginning. It's hogwash. You need to have your money out of it. And anybody out there, especially, I'm sorry to say it, but it's the retail people that got fooled. The retail people who went into all those sales meetings and they were told, what's the hot thing? The hot thing has been ESG for the last couple of years. And now those same people think that it's quite okay to jump over from talking to their individual retail clients into the fiduciary realm, the people who manage pensions, union dollars, investment, retirement plans, pensions, 401k, 403b, 457 plans, all that stuff. Those same retail advisors jumped over and made inappropriate comments. And now we have firms out there that have endeavored to fake this environment where ESG supposedly actually means something. Well, the emperor has no clothes, and it's being called out. The lawsuits, I think, will take decades to unwind, and hopefully we, the people, do a really good job of fighting back, get a couple of these cases to crack wide open, and we need to go after these firms that perpetrated the fraud. That's the whole purpose and point behind UnWoke. It's what I started years ago, and I hope that you will get involved, start doing the yeoman's work of figuring out, communicating on, pushing back, and exposing the stuff, if for no other reason. Even if you're not patriotic and fighting back for reclaiming America, our true foundational freedoms, rights, and liberties, do it for yourself, because those ESG, quote unquote ESG investments, they're not doing well. There's plenty of evidence out there showing that those woke-a-doodle investments that went ESG, they got hammered. They did horribly relative to the few investment managers out there that didn't go woke and they didn't go ESG. I'm Jonathan Broadbent. Thanks for listening. This has been another episode of UnWoke.